Let's start off with an example of how you'd access fields using dot notation. Say you have a variable called myContact, and its data type is the contact s object. To access the account ID field, you simply type myContact dot account ID. Of course, account ID is the API name of the standard account field on contacts. Not too bad, moving on. Now let's say you have an opportunity variable and you want to jump across relationships and access a field from the opportunities account. Again, we use dot notation, this time chaining it together. The first dot lets us access the account relationship, and the next dot lets us access the accounts field. So in the same line of code, we're using dot notation for two of its functions, accessing relationships and accessing fields. Let's take this a step further, this time grabbing a field from one more relationship away. We can pull fields from records that are multiple steps away from our opportunity. In fact, we can keep chaining dot notation as long as we like to pull things from really far away. There's a few things I want you to notice about this process. First of all, the syntax we use here is the same as the syntax used in formula fields when traversing relationships. Great, less you need to memorize. Next, notice how there's a slightly different API field name used when accessing a field versus a relationship. For example, to access the account's owner field, we use owner ID. To access the owner relationship, we just use owner. This pattern is always the same for all standard fields in Salesforce. You just chop off the ID portion of the API name, and all of a sudden, you're able to access the relationship. Now remember, you can only access these relationships if there's a lookup or master detail relationship between the two objects. Let's do another example, this time with a custom field in the mix. Say we have a custom territory field on accounts that's a lookup to a custom territory object. All custom fields end in _C. So if we want to access the account's territory ID, we use the API name of the territory field. When accessing a custom object relationship, however, we use _R instead of _C. I like to think the R stands for relationship, so it's easier to remember. After traversing that custom relationship, you can now access fields from the territory. Here's what the same traversal would look like from Salesforce setup. We start on an opportunity and notice there's a lookup relationship to an account. The field name column here is a little misleading. For standard fields, the actual API name should end in ID. In this case, account ID. But remember, if we're accessing the relationship and not the field value, it's just account, not account ID. Then from the account, we see there's a custom territory field that's a lookup to the territory object. Salesforce gives us the proper API name of this field if we're accessing it. Remember, if we're accessing the relationship and not the custom field, we use _R instead. Finally, on our custom object, we can access the standard name field here. That covers the portion of dot notation involving accessing fields and relationships.